I'm Zoe, 28 female. I live in a cozy one-bedroom apartment in a city big enough to feel anonymous but small enough to have a community feel, working from home as a freelance graphic designer. My life has always been about balance, balancing client deadlines with my own creative projects, my social life with my need for quiet. But for the last few months, that balance has been completely destroyed by an unspoken agreement that turned me into a permanent, unpaid babysitter. It all came to a head when my sister turned my life upside down, leading to a police visit that forced me to finally fight back. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It started subtly, as these things often do. A frantic phone call from my older sister, Louise. "Zoe, you're a lifesaver. Thomas has a last-minute work dinner, and I have this massive client event I just can't miss. Can you please watch Leo and Mia for just a few hours?" The first time, I didn't hesitate. Of course, I would. I love my niece and nephew. Leo at 8 was a whirlwind of energy and endless questions about dinosaurs, and Mia at 5 was a tiny artist who could spend hours with a box of crayons. I work from home, my schedule is flexible, and what's a few hours on a Friday night? I cleared off my dining table, turning it into a fortress of coloring books and Legos, and ordered their favorite pizza. It was fun. It was a one-off. Or so I thought. The next weekend, it was another emergency. A potential client for Louise's pharmaceutical sales job wanted to meet for drinks. It could mean a huge commission, Zoe. It's for the kids' future. How could I say no to that? The weekend after, it was a friend's crisis. Then it was a mandatory team-building retreat that somehow happened on a Saturday. Each time, the request came with a heavy dose of urgency and a sprinkle of guilt-tripping, making me feel like I was the only thing standing between my sister and professional ruin or social ostracization. Her husband, Thomas, was always conveniently tied up with his own demanding job as a financial analyst. "You know how it is in the finance world," she'd say with a sigh, as if I, a freelance graphic designer, couldn't possibly understand the pressures of a real career. The few hours slowly bled into entire evenings, then into full Saturdays, and eventually, entire weekends. The unspoken arrangement was cemented. Zoe's apartment was the official, free-of-charge daycare and hotel for Leo and Mia whenever Louise had something come up. My one-bedroom apartment, my sanctuary of peace and creativity, began to feel like a chaotic satellite of her chaotic life. My weekends, once reserved for my own projects, friends, or simply recharging, were now scheduled around nap times, snack demands, and endless loops of children's television. My dating life dwindled to nothing. Who wants to bring a date back to an apartment that has a 50-50 chance of containing 2 sleeping children and a floor littered with toys? My friends started making jokes about it. "Hey Zoe, want to grab brunch on Saturday? Oh, wait, are you on anti-duty?" It was said with a laugh, but it stung every single time because it was true. I tried to be understanding. Louise and Thomas were trying to build their careers, save for a bigger house, and give their kids the best of everything. At least, that was the narrative she sold me, and I bought it wholesale. Our parents, Ralph and Freya, were her biggest cheerleaders. "It's wonderful that you're able to help your sister so much, Zoe," my mom would say during our weekly calls. "Family has to support each other. When we were young, your aunt used to watch you and Louise all the time." They conveniently forgot that my aunt was paid for her time and that it wasn't every single weekend. My dad, a retired engineer, saw it in practical terms. "It's efficient. You're home anyway. It saves Louise and Thomas a fortune in babysitting fees." No one seemed to consider what it was costing me. The financial aspect was another layer of frustration. It wasn't just my time, it was my money. I was the one ordering the pizzas, buying the movie tickets, restocking my fridge with juice boxes and chicken nuggets, foods I never ate. When I gently mentioned the cost once, Louise just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, just add it to my tab," she'd laughed, as if it were a running joke. The tab, of course, was never paid. The one time I pressed the issue, saying groceries for the kids had added a significant amount to my monthly bill, She looked at me with genuine surprise. But they're family, Zoe. You don't charge family. The resentment began as a slow simmer and gradually built to a rolling boil. It wasn't just about the time or the money. It was about the lack of respect. I was no longer seen. As a person with my own life, my own needs, my own plans, I was a resource, a convenience. My front door became a revolving one for my sister. She dropped the kids off with a rushed hug, a list of instructions, and a promise to be back by 10 at the latest. A deadline that consistently stretched to midnight or later. There was never a genuine thank you, only a relieved, you're a lifesaver. As if I just handed her a spare tire on the side of the road, not sacrificed 48 hours of my life. I felt trapped. Every time I thought about saying no, a wave of guilt would wash over me, expertly instilled by years of family conditioning. We were raised on the mantra that family comes first, a noble sentiment that in our family had been twisted to mean everyone's needs come before Zoe's. Louise was the star, the high achiever, the one with the important career and the perfect family. I was the quiet, artistic one, the one who was expected to be flexible and accommodating. Saying no would feel like a betrayal of my assigned role. It would cause a fight, my parents would get involved, and I would inevitably be painted as the selfish, unsupportive sister. But the arrangement was becoming unsustainable. My work was starting to suffer. I found myself turning down weekend freelance gigs that paid well because I couldn't guarantee I'd have the quiet focus I needed. My apartment, once my pride and joy, was in a constant state of disarray. My plants were wilting from neglect, my own projects gathered dust in a corner, and my mental health was fraying at the edges. I was perpetually exhausted. The joy I once felt spending time with my niece and nephew was being replaced by a sense of dread every time Friday afternoon rolled around. I loved them, but I was beginning to resent their presence in my home, a feeling that made me feel even more guilty. One Friday afternoon, as I was scrubbing crayon off my living room wall, I had a moment of clarity. This wasn't support, it was exploitation. This wasn't family helping family, it was one person taking advantage of another's kindness. The unspoken arrangement was a contract I had never agreed to sign, and its terms were slowly suffocating me. I looked around my messy apartment, at the half-finished design project on my computer screen, and at my reflection in the darkened window, tired, stressed, and unhappy. I knew something had to change. I just had no idea that my decision to finally stand up for myself would unleash a storm that would shake the very foundations of my family. The doormat was about to get up and walk away. The breaking point arrived on a Friday that started like any other. The sun was shining, I had just landed a promising new client, and I was looking forward to a weekend of blissful, uninterrupted work and maybe even a quiet dinner out by myself. I had plans. For the first time in what felt like a year, I had my own plans. I was going to visit a new art exhibit on Saturday and spend Sunday completely offline, just reading and recharging. I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in months. That feeling shattered at 4:15 p.m. when my phone buzzed with the familiar, dreaded ringtone I'd assigned to Louise. I let it go to voicemail, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Maybe, just maybe, it was something else. A quick question, a bit of news. But when the text message popped up immediately after, my stomach sank. "Zoe, pick up, it's an emergency." My hand trembled slightly as I called her back. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice tight. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, her tone a perfect blend of panic and relief. "Listen, something huge has come up. Thomas and I have been invited to this last-minute weekend getaway with his boss. It's at a lake house, super exclusive. It's a massive networking opportunity for him. It could mean a promotion. We have to go." I waited for the inevitable. The silence on my end was heavy. "So, I need you to take the kids," she said, her voice shifting from urgent to expectant. "I can drop them off in an hour, just for the weekend. We'll be back Sunday night." Just for the weekend? The words echoed in my head, mocking me. It was never just for the weekend. It was my entire weekend, my art exhibit, my quiet Sunday, my sanity. The simmering resentment from the past few months boiled over. This time, something inside me snapped. The guilt, the sense of obligation, it was all still there, but for the first time, my own needs were screaming louder. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it felt like a cannon blast in the silence. Louise laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "What? Zoe, I don't have time for jokes. This is important." "I'm not joking, Louise," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I can't do it. I have plans this weekend." The line went quiet for a moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to process this unprecedented rebellion. "Plans?" she finally scoffed. "What kind of plans could you possibly have that are more important than your brother-in-law's career? Are you meeting up with a friend? Just cancel. They'll understand." "They're my plans," I said firmly. "And I'm not canceling them. This is the 5th weekend in a row you've asked me to take the kids, Louise. I'm not your built-in babysitter." The shift in her tone was instantaneous. The manufactured panic evaporated, replaced by cold, sharp anger. "My built-in babysitter? Is that what you think this is? This is family helping family. This is me trying to build a better life for my children, and you're complaining about having to spend time with your own niece and nephew." "I love Leo and Mia," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I also have a life. And a job. You don't respect my time, my home, or my money. You just assume I'll drop everything whenever it's convenient for you." "Oh, I don't respect you," she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "I'm the one working a high-pressure job, managing a household, and raising 2 kids. You sit at home on your computer all day. It's not that hard to watch a movie with them. You're being incredibly selfish, Zoe." The accusation hit me like a slap. Selfish. It was the word my family always used to keep me in line. For years, it had been my kryptonite. But this time, it felt different. This time, it felt like a badge of honor. Maybe being selfish was just another word for having boundaries. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, my voice now calm and detached. "But my answer is no. You and Thomas will have to find another solution. There are babysitting apps. You have friends. I am not an option this weekend." "You can't do this to me," she yelled, her voice cracking with fury. "I'm already packed. The kids are expecting to see you. What am I supposed to tell them?" "You can tell them that Auntie Zoe has a life of her own," I said. "Or you can tell them the truth, that you and their father failed to arrange proper childcare before making plans." I heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by a threat that was all too familiar. "You know what? Fine, I'm calling Mom and Dad. We'll see what they have to say about their selfish, ungrateful daughter who won't even lift a finger to help her own family." "Do what you have to do, Louise," I said, a strange sense of peace settling over me. The line had been drawn. For the first time, I hadn't backed down, I hadn't caved, I hadn't apologized for existing outside of her needs. I was terrified of the fallout, but I was also proud. I ended the call before she could scream another insult. My hands were shaking, and my heart was racing, but I felt a sliver of victory. I had said no. I had protected my weekend. I had stood up for myself. I took a deep breath and tried to push the impending family drama out of my mind. I was going to enjoy my weekend, no matter what. I put my phone on silent, made myself a cup of tea, and sat down at my computer, determined to get some work done and put the ugly conversation behind me. For about an hour, there was peace. The silence was beautiful, a stark contrast to the chaos of previous weekends. I felt a sense of relief, so profound it was almost giddy. I was free. But I had severely underestimated my sister's capacity for drama and retaliation. The war had just begun, and she was about to escalate it in a way I could never have imagined. The peace I had briefly cherished was shattered by a loud, insistent knocking at my apartment door. It wasn't the gentle tap of a neighbor or the rhythmic rap of a delivery person. It was a heavy, authoritative sound that sent a jolt of anxiety through me. My first thought was that Louise, in her rage, had driven over to confront me in person, probably with the kids in tow to use as emotional leverage. I steeled myself, took a deep breath, and walked to the door, ready for round 2 of our argument. But when I looked through the peephole, my blood ran cold. It was Louise. It was 2 police officers, their faces stern under the harsh, fluorescent light of the hallway. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. Did a neighbor complain about noise? Was there an issue in the building? Nothing made sense. My hand trembled as I unlocked and opened the door a few inches, leaving the chain on. "Good evening," the taller officer said, his voice polite but firm. "Are you Zoe Miller?" "Yes," I managed to squeak out. "Is everything okay?" "We received a call requesting a wellness check, ma'am," the second officer explained. "There was a report of a disturbance and concern for the welfare of 2 young children at this address." "Children," my heart hammered against my ribs. "Children? There are no children here. I live alone." The officers exchanged a look. "Ma'am," the caller, a Ms. Louise Forster, stated that her 2 children, Leo and Mia, were supposed to be in your care. She said you had an argument, and she's now unable to reach you, and is concerned for their safety. The sheer audacity of it knocked the air out of my lungs. Louise hadn't just called our parents. She had called the police. She had weaponized them, lied to them, and sent them to my door to intimidate me, all because I had said no. A hot, furious wave washed over me, momentarily eclipsing the fear. "That's an absolute lie," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "My sister and I had a disagreement on the phone an hour ago because I refused to babysit for her this weekend. Her children have never been here. They are with her. She is lying to you to harass me." The officers' expressions remained neutral, professional. They had a job to do. "We understand, ma'am, but we still need to verify that there are no children here," the taller one said. "Would you mind if we just took a quick look inside?" Humiliation burned in my cheeks. My neighbors were starting to peek out of their doors, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. A police visit was a rare and dramatic event in our quiet building. I felt my reputation, my peaceful existence, crumbling under the weight of my sister's malicious lie. But I knew that refusing would only make me look guilty. "Fine," I said, unlatching the chain and opening the door wider. "Come in, look wherever you want." They stepped inside, their presence immediately making my small apartment feel claustrophobic. They were respectful and quick, glancing into my small bedroom, the bathroom, even the closets. It took less than a minute to confirm what I had told them. The apartment was quiet, tidy, and conspicuously child-free. "All right, ma'am. It's clear there are no children here," the first officer said, his tone softening slightly. "I'm sorry to have disturbed you." Just as they were about to leave, my neighbor from across the hall, Benedict, opened his door. Benedict was a lawyer who I'd exchanged pleasantries with in the elevator a few times. He was quiet, smart, and had a very calming presence. He saw the officers and the distraught look on my face, and his expression immediately sharpened with concern. "Is everything okay, Zoe?" he asked, stepping into the hallway. "My sister called them," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush of anger and embarrassment. "She lied and said her kids were here and that she was worried for their safety, all because I wouldn't babysit." Benedict's eyebrows shot up. He looked at the officers. "So, to be clear, you were dispatched here based on a false report." The officer nodded. "It appears so. The caller alleged her children were here and potentially in danger. We found no evidence of that." Benedict's legal mind was clearly whirring. "Filing a false police report is a serious offense," he said, his voice steady and professional. "It ties up emergency resources and can be used as a tool for harassment, which seems to be exactly what happened here." He turned to me. "Zoe, did you get the officers' names and badge numbers? You should absolutely file a report of your own." The thought hadn't even occurred to me. I was so caught up in the shock and humiliation that I hadn't considered fighting back. But hearing Benedict, seeing the situation through his clear, logical eyes, ignited a spark of determination within me. He was right. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. Louise had crossed a legal line. I got the officers' information, and they gave me the incident number, advising me on how to file a formal complaint about the false report. After they left, Benedict stayed with me in the hallway as my other neighbors retreated back into their apartments. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. I shook my head, tears of frustration finally welling in my eyes. "No, I can't believe she would do this. It's insane." "It's more than insane, it's illegal," he said firmly. "Look, I know this is a family matter, and it's none of my business, but if you need any advice on how to handle this legally, please don't hesitate to ask." What she did was calculated and malicious. His kindness was a balm on my raw nerves. For the first time all day, I didn't feel completely alone. I thanked him, my voice thick with emotion, and retreated back into my apartment. The sense of victory I'd felt earlier had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Louise thought she could bully me into submission. She thought a little public humiliation and a scare from the police would put me back in my box. She was wrong. She hadn't just drawn a line in the sand, she had declared war. And she had no idea that I was finally ready to fight back with everything I had. The game had changed, and I was about to start making my own rules. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had a hangover from pure adrenaline. The anger and humiliation from the police visit had solidified into something else, a cold, methodical determination. Louise had escalated this beyond a simple family argument. She had tried to use the law to intimidate me. It was time I used the truth to dismantle her. My first call was to my parents. As expected, they had already received a highly dramatized, tear-soaked version of events from Louise. "Zoe, I am so disappointed in you," my mother, Freya, began, her voice dripping with sorrowful accusation. "Your sister is distraught. She called us, worried sick. She said you two had an argument and then you wouldn't answer your phone. She thought something terrible had happened to the children." I let her finish, my knuckles white as I gripped my phone. "Mom, did she also tell you that the children were never here? Did she mention that she called the police and filed a false report against me?" There was a pause. "Well, she was panicked," my mother stammered, already rushing to defend her favored daughter. "She wasn't thinking clearly. You know how she gets when she's worried about her family." "She wasn't worried, Mom. She was angry," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "She was punishing me for saying no. 2 police officers showed up at my door. My neighbors saw everything. She deliberately tried to humiliate and scare me." "Now, Zoe, don't be dramatic," my father, Ralph, cut in from another line. "It was a misunderstanding. Louise overreacted, that's all. The important thing is for you to apologize and smooth things over. She needs your support." Apologize? The request was so ludicrous, so completely detached from reality that I almost laughed. They didn't care about what had been done to me. They only cared about restoring the family's fragile, dysfunctional peace, a peace that was always maintained at my expense. "I will not be apologizing," I stated clearly, "and my support is no longer available to her. I'm done." I ended the call before they could launch into another lecture about family duty. It was painfully clear that they were not my allies. They were, and always had been, Louise's enablers. If I wanted justice, I would have to find it myself. My conversation with Benedict the night before had planted a seed in my mind. He had called Louise's actions calculated and malicious. It made me wonder, what was this massive networking opportunity that was so important she was willing to burn our entire relationship to the ground for it? The story had seemed plausible enough at the time, given her and Thomas's career-focused lives. But now, in the harsh light of her subsequent actions, it felt flimsy. The level of her retaliation felt disproportionate to a simple missed work event. There had to be more to it. My graphic design skills mostly involved branding and marketing, but they also required a certain level of digital savvy. I was good at finding things online. I started with the basics, searching social media for any mention of Thomas's company, a mid-level investment firm, hosting a retreat at a lake house. I found nothing. No corporate announcements, no tagged posts, nothing. Then I moved on to Louise. Her social media was a carefully curated highlight reel of her life, family photos, motivational quotes about her career, and check-ins at fancy restaurants. It was all about projecting an image of success and happiness. I scrolled through her friends list, focusing on the ones I knew weren't just family or casual acquaintances, but her actual inner circle. One name stood out, a woman named Kendra, who was a notorious oversharer. I navigated to Kendra's profile, which was public. I scrolled through her recent posts, and my heart began to beat faster. There, posted just 2 hours ago, was a group photo. It was a picture of 6 people, laughing and holding up champagne glasses on the deck of a beautiful, modern house overlooking a sparkling lake. In the center of the photo, with her arm wrapped tightly around a man who was definitely not her husband, was my sister, Louise. The man was handsome, with a confident smile. Kendra had tagged everyone in the photo. Benedict looked thoughtful. "It's highly unorthodox," he said slowly. "But given the circumstances, and the fact that she tried to use the legal system to bully you, yes, I'll do it. I think your parents need to understand that this isn't just about hurt feelings. There are real-world consequences to her actions." His agreement was a massive relief. It felt like I finally had someone on my team. The final piece of my plan was the most difficult. I needed to get Thomas there. My brother-in-law was often absent from these dinners, usually with a work excuse that I now suspected was often a lie from Louise to keep him away from her family. He was the most wronged person in this situation, and he deserved to know the truth. Getting his number without raising Louise's suspicions was tricky. I ended up calling the main line of his investment firm and, using the excuse of planning a surprise birthday party for Louise, managed to get his direct cell number from a helpful receptionist. I called him that Friday, my heart pounding. "Thomas, it's Zoe. I need to ask you a huge favor. It is critically important that you come to family dinner at my parents' house this Sunday. No excuses." He sounded surprised to hear from me. "Oh, hey, Zoe. I don't know, Sunday is usually my one day to catch up on." "Please, Thomas," I interrupted, my voice firm. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't the most important thing in the world. It directly concerns you and your family. You need to be there. And please, do not mention this call to Louise." My tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation because his demeanor shifted. "Okay," he said slowly. "Okay, Zoe, I'll be there." With all the pieces in place, I felt a grim sense of readiness. The stage was set. The actors were all invited. The evidence was prepared. For years, I had been the quiet, accommodating daughter and sister, the one who absorbed the family's dysfunction to keep the peace. But that person was gone. On Sunday, my family would be meeting the new Zoe, and she had a story to tell. I arrived at my parents' house on Sunday with Benedict by my side. He was dressed in smart casual attire, looking every bit the calm, collected lawyer he was. I was carrying a tote bag, inside which was the folder, my carefully prepared arsenal of truth. My mother, Freya, opened the door, her smile faltering for a second when she saw Benedict. "Zoe, and you've brought a friend. How lovely," she said, though her eyes were filled with questions. "Mom, Dad, this is my neighbor, Benedict," I said as we stepped inside. My father, Ralph, shook his hand, sizing him up with his typical engineering precision. Louise and her family were already there. She shot me a venomous look, the anger from our phone call still simmering. She clearly expected me to have come crawling back, full of apologies. Seeing me with a handsome, confident man by my side only seemed to fuel her irritation. Thomas looked tired, as usual, but he gave me a curious, questioning glance. The kids, Leo and Mia, ran up to hug me, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. I hugged them back tightly, a pang of sadness hitting me for the turmoil their parents' actions were about to cause. We made it through the initial pleasantries. My mother had cooked her usual Sunday roast, and the smell filled the house, a familiar comfort that felt jarringly out of place. We sat down at the dining table, the seating arrangement a perfect portrait of our family's dynamics. My parents at either end, Louise and Thomas on one side, and me and Benedict on the other, a clear line drawn down the middle of the table. My mother tried to steer the conversation toward safe topics, the weather, a neighbor's new car, Dad's golf game. Louise, however, couldn't resist taking a jab. "So, Zoe," she began, a syrupy sweet smile on her face. "Finally found time in your busy schedule to grace us with your presence. I hope we're not interrupting any of your very important plans." The room went quiet. This was it, the opening I needed. I placed my fork down gently. "Actually, Louise, my plans from last weekend are exactly what I wanted to talk about," I said, my voice calm and even. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the folder, placing it on the table with a soft thud. "What's that?" my father asked, frowning. "It's a collection of documents," I explained, my eyes locked on Louise. "It's about what happened last weekend. I think it's time we all got on the same page about the facts." Louise rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh my God, are you still on this? Zoe, you were being selfish. You said no. I got worried. End of story. Apologize and let's move on." "It's not the end of the story," I said, opening the folder. "Let's start with this." I slid the first document across the table to my father, a copy of the police report. "This is a report from the wellness check that was called on my apartment last Friday night. As you can see, the caller is listed as Louise Forster. The reason is a fabricated concern for the welfare of her children, who were never in my home." My father picked up the paper, his brow furrowed as he read. My mother leaned over to look, her hand flying to her mouth. Thomas's head snapped toward Louise, his eyes wide with confusion. "You called the cops on your sister." "I was worried," Louise insisted, her voice getting shrill. "She wasn't answering her phone." "That's a lie," I said calmly. "You were angry because I wouldn't cancel my plans to accommodate yours, which brings me to my next point. What exactly were your plans, Louise?" I took out the next item, the high-resolution photo of her on the lake house deck, her arm around Julian. I placed it in the center of the table. The effect was instantaneous. Louise's face went completely pale. Thomas stared at the photo, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. My parents just looked confused. "Who is that man, Louise?" I asked quietly. That's just a friend," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. "Is he?" I slid the printouts from Kendra's social media post next to the photo. "Because your friend Kendra called it a birthday celebration for Julian. And according to the rental agreement for the lake house, which I also have a copy of, the property was rented by a Dr. Julian Croft, not by Thomas's company. There was no corporate retreat, was there, Louise?" Silence. The only sound was my mother's soft gasp. Thomas slowly pushed his chair back from the table, his eyes never leaving the photo of his wife with another man. "You told me you were at a work event," he said, his voice dangerously low. "It was a mix," Louise tried, her voice trembling. "It was friends and work people." "Then why did you lie to me?" I pressed. "Why did you lie to Thomas? And why, when I refused to be your accomplice, did you lie to the police?" I turned to my parents. She didn't overreact. She wasn't worried. She acted with malice because I was a threat to her secret weekend trip with another man. She tried to discredit me and intimidate me by sending the police to my home. My father looked from the papers to Louise, his face grim. The engineer in him was processing the undeniable data. The narrative he had accepted was collapsing. "Louise," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "is this true?" Louise burst into tears, the last resort of a manipulator who has run out of lies. "She's twisting everything. Zoe has always been jealous of me. She's trying to ruin my life." Before my mother could rush to comfort her, Benedict spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through the drama with calm authority. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," he said, addressing my parents directly. "I'm here as Zoe's friend, but I'm also a lawyer. I want to be very clear about something. What Louise did by calling the police is not just a family matter. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense. It carries fines, and in some cases, jail time. Zoe would be well within her rights to press charges for both the false report and for harassment." The word criminal hung in the air, thick and heavy. My parents stared at him, the legal reality of the situation finally sinking in. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was real. Thomas finally stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked at Louise, his face a mess of hurt and betrayal. "We're leaving," he said, his voice cracking. "Leo, Mia, get your coats." He looked at me, a flicker of gratitude in his pained eyes. "Thank you, Zoe." He gathered his children and walked out the door without another word. Louise scrambled to follow him, sobbing and calling his name, but he didn't look back. And just like that, the perfect family my sister had built on a foundation of lies shattered on my parents' dining room floor. The intervention was over. The truth was out, and the fallout was just beginning. The silence that descended upon the dining room after Thomas and the kids left was deafening. Louise had run out after them, her pleas echoing from the driveway before being cut off by the sound of a car engine starting and driving away. My parents just sat there, stunned, staring at the evidence still spread across the table. The comforting aroma of the roast now seemed sickening. My father, Ralph, was the first to speak. He looked at me, his expression not angry but weary and defeated. The black-and-white, logical world he lived in had been fractured. "You knew this would destroy her marriage," he said. "It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact." "Her actions destroyed her marriage," I corrected him gently. "I just turned on the lights so everyone could see it. For months, you both told me to support her, to be a good sister, to put family first. But you never asked if she was being a good sister to me. You enabled her, and you guilt-tripped me into being her doormat. The police showing up at my door was the end of that." My mother, Freya, started to cry softly. "We just wanted everyone to get along," she whispered. We never knew she was lying like that." "That's the problem," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "You never asked. You just assumed I was the one who needed to be more flexible, more understanding. You assumed she was the one who deserved all the support." I looked at Benedict, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. "From now on, things are going to be different. I am drawing new borders. My home is my own. My time is my own. I will not be the family's default problem solver or babysitter. My help and support will be given when I choose to give it, not when it is demanded of me." I stood up and began gathering my evidence into the folder. "I love you both, but my relationship with you needs to change too. It has to be based on mutual respect, not on my willingness to sacrifice my life for Louise's convenience." We left shortly after that. The drive back to our apartment building was quiet. "Are you okay?" Benedict finally asked as we pulled into the parking garage. "I think so," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. I felt lighter, as if I had finally put down a burden I had been carrying for years. "Thank you, Benedict. I couldn't have done that without you." "You were incredible, Zoe," he said, smiling. "You were calm, prepared, and you spoke your truth. They had no choice but to listen." The days that followed were a whirlwind of quiet fallout. Louise, as expected, tried to launch a smear campaign. She sent me a string of furious texts, calling me a vindictive monster who had ruined her life. She told our extended family a twisted version of the story where I, out of jealousy, had hired a private investigator to stalk her and invent a story to break up her marriage. But the narrative didn't stick. The evidence was too clear, and Thomas, for his part, was not silent. He told his family the truth, and the story of Louise's affair and her false police report began to circulate. The sympathy she so desperately sought never materialized. Thomas filed for divorce within 2 weeks. He moved out, securing temporary full custody of the kids, citing Louise's instability and deceitful behavior. Louise was forced to move out of their beautiful suburban home and into a small, overpriced apartment. Her perfect life, the one she had lorded over me for years, had imploded. She had to start paying for her own childcare, and the financial reality of her choices hit her hard. My relationship with my parents was strained for a while. They were caught between their lifelong habit of defending Louise and the undeniable truth I had presented. We had several difficult conversations, but for the first time I didn't back down. I held my ground, reiterating my new boundaries. Slowly, painstakingly, they began to understand. They started calling me just to ask how I was doing, not to ask for a favor. My dad even called one day to apologize. "We should have listened to you, Zoe," he said. "We weren't fair to you." It was a simple admission, but it meant the world to me. As for me, my life began to blossom in the space I had reclaimed. My work flourished. I took on new, exciting projects. My apartment once again became my sanctuary. My friendship with Benedict deepened, evolving from neighborly support into something more. We started having dinner together, exploring art exhibits, and discovering that we had far more in common than just a manipulative sister. He was kind, intelligent, and respected my boundaries without me ever having to state them. He saw me for who I was, not for what I could do for him. Months later, I was sitting on my balcony with Benedict, watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Louise. The message was short and startlingly different from her previous ones. "I know it's too late, but I'm sorry. You were right. I messed everything up." I showed the text to Benedict. "Do you think she means it?" I wondered aloud. "Maybe," he said, taking my hand. "People can change, but that doesn't mean you have to let her back in. Your peace is the priority now." He was right. I didn't reply to the text. Forgiveness might come someday, but trust was a different matter entirely. I had drawn my new borders not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first, and my world was better for it. I had faced the storm and come out the other side, not just intact, but stronger, happier, and finally, truly free.